So we will open up tonight's budget workshop, and roll call show that all counselors are present. And just before we start the workshop, we wanted to just take a quick minute and look at the statement regarding the protests and the actions in Minnesota. So I don't know if anybody wants to jump in as to where we are with the statement.
First of all, that I really want to have a chance to actually look at it and add some things to it or edit or do, you know, I honestly have been right out straight with work all day yesterday and today. So I've kind of scanned over some of the things people have added, and I would like the opportunity to actually be able to take it in and respond, and yeah.
Okay. Would anybody object to moving it to tomorrow night's meeting? Luckily, we have several. Sophie would.
So I am not objecting to moving because it's not my place. But I will just say tomorrow night you have a special council meeting with 3 orders that I don't think will take a ton of time, but you also have Joe Madigan, who has revenues and expenses and some capital stuff. So just want to.
Can I make a suggestion? So Cindy, I wasn't necessarily asking that we move the discussion to a different time. I've read through it enough that I can discuss it tonight. I'm just saying that in terms of, I wouldn't be ready to leave this meeting and say, yes, let's put it out there, because I would like to have, it's been very quick, the turnaround on this. So I would like a chance to sit with it for just a little bit, but I can discuss it tonight. I mean, I've read it, and, you know, I'm just not ready to sign on the line yet.
Okay. Well, I think
I was going to say, if you want, I can start. I've read it, and I've read Lori's comments too. And I think my last comment was, let's just keep this short and sweet. And there was one word that was changed. There was a couple edits, but I'm comfortable with it the way that it is, and I'm comfortable with it. I don't know about a title. I don't know about if it needs a title. I don't know in what format a town puts out a statement, or where the statement is, where it is publicly. I'm not really sure about that. But I do think we just need to keep it, you know, succinct, I guess, is my thoughts on that.
I agree with you, Cheryl, because I actually and I'm in that world of Zoom meetings every day, but I actually thought when you made, I think it was you that made the comment about with the statement from maybe the modification of the word from Tom, that simple, succinct, but then all of a sudden we started getting things I just got kind of just lost track of it. But I'm with you on this. Let's keep it basic. We made our statement. I don't want to start just kind of taking and starting to morph this into something that's going to be out of control. So
I agree with the 2 previous comments. I liked the work that Cindy did initially. I think there've been a couple of modifications to that are relatively minor, and that's what I'm really comfortable with.
So I think it was great that we had 2 different citizens write in asking if we'd make a statement. The city of Portland apparently made a statement yesterday, but couldn't find where it was published. But when I looked on their website, over the years, they've made resolutions and statements that were addressing racism in Portland. So to answer Cheryl's query about, well, what is this? We have a choice of what it is. It can be a statement we put on our webpage. It can be something that we make a resolution, and or it could just be a condolence that we're sad that this, that the death of George Floyd at the hands of arresting officers we grieve that that happened. We could do it as simply as that, or we could make a statement about our goals as a town to address racism. Or we could do what Rockland did, which besides saying their condolences, Rockland actually articulated that our state has very rigid or not rigorous ways in which they evaluate police officers, and that Rockland then on top of that has their own. And Megan and someone else had mentioned that we have our town has a certification. And so those are all great things, I think, to include and identify what that certification means, because it was an abbreviation. It doesn't actually, by saying we're certified by this body, it doesn't say what that means as far as the training that our police officers get in bias, understanding unconscious bias, or I don't actually know exactly what they get, but it's a chance for us to state that out loud. So the edits that I put on top of,
I think, Lori, that's just going too far into the weeds for me. And we're not Portland, and we're not Rockland, and we do have our own set of values here in our community. And I think we just need to model our community after our set of values. Otherwise, we just have to have massive discussions about what needs to go in and what needs to go out, and we just don't have the time to do that. And I'm not saying it's not important enough to make the time. I'm just saying that, and one of the questions that I asked for you to do is, instead of adding comments, maybe if you want to write your own so that we can, compare the two, that would be a lot easier for all of us right now to just go, okay, you write your own and then see how it compares. And I'm sure nobody minds if you want to, do something like that. But
I just want to hop in here real quick. I like the initial statement that Cindy wrote. I think it could be strengthened, actually. I know we're not Portland, but we're Orono, and we're all feeling the same thing. And I think we do need to say something. Maybe I think we can speak out a little more strongly about the terrible thing that happened, and saying that, yeah, there are problems, and it's terrible when police don't. I mean, they're the great police, and then there are those who do terrible things. But I don't think it's a bad thing to acknowledge more of like the constant racial injustice that's going on, because yeah, we are Orono. And I tell you, if there's a tolerant community, I like to think this is it. So if there ever was a time for us to speak out a little more loudly, the whole world is paying attention, not to us, but to everything. And so I think we could beef it up a little bit. Like Megan, I've been out straight and I haven't had time to get in here and really get in the weeds with this. But although I liked the statement a lot, Cindy, I think you did a great job. It feels a little safe. And I think we need to maybe push it a little bit, because I think we all are really passionate about this. I want to add just one more thing right now. I messaged Cindy earlier about this. I just want to take a quick minute, because during this is a stressful time, for everybody, for everything that's happening nationally right now and everything, and personally, there's a lot of stress too. And I think sometimes we end up zoomed out or frustrated with a number of different things. I just want to publicly apologize for the tone I used when speaking with Councilor Osher last week. I feel like I was a little too harsh, and it hasn't set well with me at all since that moment. I thought those feelings would just go away. I didn't think I was too harsh, but I absolutely feel like I was. And I just want to publicly apologize, and also apologize to any of your family that had to see that, because I feel like it wasn't fair, and I'm not proud of that moment. And so there you go. So I just want to extend that. My tone was, I feel, inappropriate, and it was on me, and apology extended. So thank you.
thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
It was a hard meeting for me, and I appreciate you following up. Thank you.
I just wanted to say that the tone was inappropriate, and I really feel that. So thank you for hearing that.
Well-
Just to chime back in on the letter, the only things, so I don't disagree with you, Sam, in terms of being able to sort of be a little more direct with the language. That's one of the reasons I'd like to actually be able to spend just a little bit of time with it. I know that, and I see Josh is here, the Orono Police Department shared a statement today that was put out by a number of organizations, including the Maine Chiefs of Police Association, that was pretty direct and straightforward about, the relationship that should be between law enforcement and people of different races. So I think that we can probably also lean into that a little bit as a guide in, or as you say, Sam, beefing up some of our language and being a bit more direct. I'd love to take a stab at that. The only thing that troubles me about reading the letter, and this goes back to what Cheryl was saying, which I think was more of a rhetorical question about, well, what is this letter supposed to be? There were some suggestions that basically would be enacting policy through the letter, and that is troubling to me because we, as Cheryl said, we haven't, I mean, if we start saying in this letter, well, we're going to enact this policy and that policy and do this and that, those kinds of things need council discussion and vetting. There's a process involved in that. I believe that public officials should be responsive but not reactionary. So I don't want to cross the line into making policy decisions through this letter when we are really pushing it out there very quickly without a lot of time to consider what we're doing.
So I wanted to make a few comments. I think we made a statement Monday, as far as, we verbally made some statements. So if you want to take some time to work on this statement, that's up to you. I got the impression that you wanted it out there quickly, so that's why I drafted what I drafted. As far as the talking about policy or an advisory board or anything, I would suggest maybe that be put on a work plan discussion so that we could then put it in the normal course of how we do things, rather than, like you said, try and put it in in this statement or resolution or whatever it is, because I don't like the way it happens without any background on that. So that,
Yeah, so I was, my apologies, I was editing in the way I, as an academic, learned to edit. So although you guys were not able to see my little comments on the side, what I did is I highlighted each sentence and then I made a comment about that sentence without necessarily saying, I think this sentence needs to change. It just, I told you what it brought to mind. So in one place you had written something like, we are dedicated to making the world better. That wasn't the exact quote, but basically you said something that had a bit of futuring in it. And that's why I replied with, if we're going to make a proclamation in a way that we're going to do something different in the future, then I gave this suggestion. One would be this, at the Bangor Black Lives Matter event, one of the organizers made specific proposals that Bangor could do. So I suggested, I said, here was what was suggested. It's not that I'm suggesting we do that. I was responding to a sentence that was a very nice sentence about, we want to do better. And I think that we don't need to write that this week. We don't need to write, we want to do better. I think we can write, as I mentioned about the Rockland, here's how we do, here's what we do. Here's what our chief does when we find that there's a behavior of a police officer we're not comfortable with. Here's how, so just to reassure our citizens that we are a town that takes this seriously, that thinks about this. We are not a town where we have police officers that are brutalizing our citizens and get to keep their jobs, right? And so, so this is a chance for us to say, we wouldn't want that to happen here, and here's how we make sure that doesn't happen. So I was only, the reason I suggested something about a committee, is because that was something that was suggested at Bangor, and you had a sentence that said, we want to do better. I'm sure we all want to do better. I think that what we write has to be tight and clear, and just to let people know from here on, this is what we're doing as leaders of this town. And also we basically to express our condolences that these kinds of violent acts have happened through history, and we've all not, as Sam said about the pride thing, we've all not taken action because we have so many other things going on. And one of the first steps is to say out loud, we'd like to let you know what we're doing now, and that we'd like to be, we want to lead on this.
Okay, well, at this point, maybe we could give you and Sam a chance to beef it up, and Megan,
I'll
I don't know if you want to take a shot, but
I mean,
I'll do what Carol said. I'll take yours that you started with, and instead of writing these comments on each sentence, which is my editing style, I will write a draft based on your outline, which we all liked when you made a statement on the
Sure.
last meeting. And Megan, who's the writer here, and she's very good at this, and Sophie has told us many times that Megan's come in and really tightened up writing that the town council is, that she's written or that you've written. So I'm happy to, and I know she's busy, so I will take another stab at it so that it's not the comments that I wrote, but a paragraph that's very much based on yours, and we'll see what we can go from there.
Yeah, I really, in addition to just kind of being more direct with some of the language, I think that it's, so we on council have spent a lot of time talking about and have heard many presentations from Josh about what exactly it means to be CALEA accredited, and now what that transition to MLEAP has been. So we have a lot of those policy details and have heard a lot about that from Josh. Maybe folks in the community haven't received all of that information. And I agree with Cheryl that we shouldn't get too deep in the weeds, but I don't think that it's too difficult to come up with some concise language that just kind of gives the broad strokes of what those accreditations mean and what it means in practical terms to how our police department operates. Because I'd really like to see them get the credit they deserve for that process. And I don't think that it will get too deep in the weeds if we can keep it concise. But I mean, I would like to see something like that in there.
okay, so why don't we see what we can come up with, and Laura, you can circulate something when you get it, and we'll see if we've got time tomorrow. If not, we'll look at it on the Monday, I think, is the next meeting. Sophie, I see a finger.
Yeah. Well, I want to pop in just to let you know that, when people write in and ask for council and the Orono Police Department to take a stance, the Orono Police Department, the Orono Town Manager are not going to take positions until council takes a position. That is our job. We look to council. So based on the conversation on Monday night, Josh worked with the Maine chiefs, and they came up through his trade, through the trade association with a statement that works. It's out there now saying that the Orono Police Department stands behind that statement and supports that statement. So at this point, I think staff is ready to turn its attention back to operation and what we're doing here. If you need anything else from us, you need to be explicit in that, and we will absolutely rise to the challenge, right, Chief?
Yes, sorry, absolutely.
Okay, so Lori and Sam, you got enough to go on, or?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I agree with a number of the comments, just beefing it up a little bit, like Megan and Meg. I didn't know about this statement, which I just printed out. I would encourage anybody to go on Facebook. Yes, I was multitasking. Go on Facebook, Orono Police, look at this statement. It answers a lot of questions and does an excellent job of saying this. That said, I still think we need to have a strong statement about this. And I just want to clarify one thing. Not that this was what I think what Sophie meant, but it's like, I think we all feel this is really important to do, not just because we got a couple letters from concerned citizens, but, and I know, and so I just want to clarify that for everybody, that this isn't just being discussed because we got these emails. I think this is something we all witnessed and feel like it's a moment where we can do this. Again, I don't think we need to get into a full detail of adding tons of things. I think anyway, avoid the weeds, as we said, but still beef it up a little. Anyway, I'm done.
Sam, people who don't normally engage with council, I think they might feel like staff is being very silent. I know Josh has taken time to respond individually to people who have inquired directly with him. But I just want to be very clear that there's a process in place, and the PD is never going to just issue a statement until council first speaks, because we follow your lead. And I'm sure Chief Ewing would be happy to post that statement on the police department website and maybe work with Bell to get it up on a link on our web, on the main page as well.
Will do.
That sounds like a great idea. Okay. Now to go back to a little drier topic, but public infrastructure. Not that Rob Yerxa is not a very interesting gentleman. And thank you, Josh, for being there.
So I hope, we're not supposed to go to the beginning, at the end, we gotta go. There we go. Are you ready, Cindy, for Rob and I to kind of take over for a few minutes?
Yes, please.
So, Public Works is actually several different departments all kind of come under one department, but they are different cost centers for the town, and council votes on each of these cost centers when it adopts the budget. And so I want to go through just very quickly what each of these cost centers are, and Rob is going to jump in as appropriate. So general maintenance is the largest piece of the operations budget for Public Works, and it's because all of the salary for the 12 people assigned to general Public Works, winter maintenance, cemeteries, solid waste, all live in general maintenance, all of the regular salary and all of the benefits. So that is, that's why this is such a large piece of the budget. But general maintenance, you would think it, kind of sounds simple, but it really isn't. It's a lot of work. We've got 40 miles of town road and state road that are within the urban compact that we're responsible for. We have 17 miles of sidewalk that we're responsible for. We have to sweep and mark the streets and take care of signs and traffic lights, storm sewer and drainage systems. You guys are well versed in our MS4 permit, which takes an awful lot of energy and quite honestly money to comply with the federal rules around that. Public Works does all of the mowing, and I love it, miscellaneous. Essentially, if it happens outside of facilities, it's generally something that Rob, if he's not responsible for it with his crew, he certainly ends up having a hand in it. All the roadside mowing, the general maintenance supports all of the tree removal. That would be all of Rob's work with the tree board. While we do have some large capital projects that you see in the capital plan, Rob also manages to take a small amount of money and some very talented people and stretch that to support our capital investment with those small pots of miscellaneous capital money. And the reason we can support that is most of that is done with in-house labor. And all of the project management and administration is funded out of general maintenance. So when we look at general maintenance this year, what we know is that this is funding 12 full-time people. The half-time shared Public Works WPCF laborer position is not being funded in this budget. We're keeping that vacant. We realized streetlight savings because of the project of about $28,000. Remember that a portion, about $25,000 of that, is picked up in debt that we have to pay over the next 5 years. And if you look overall from the FY20 budget, this is a decrease of about $84,174 or 8%. So that's what I have on general maintenance. Were there any questions about the material that you got around general maintenance?
Sophie, when you talk about wages, so unless it's in a different spot, when we look at the the front end of this, it says that there was 13.5 positions.
Yep, so one of those positions is actually the mechanic who is, his wages are allocated to the fleet maintenance facility. So,
Okay.
and the halftime is not there because we are capturing that vacancy.
Great, thank you.
Rob, was there anything you wanted to add?
No, I just, I think one of the highlights of the general maintenance budget is the streetlight project and the savings that we're already beginning to realize. Really kind of highlights the value of getting that project done.
All right, hearing nothing, I'm going to continue on. Is that all right, Cindy?
Yeah, I was just gonna highlight when you talk about the streetlights, that is quite a drop from 73,000 to 45,000. So, good job, guys.
Well, not only is it a drop, but the quality of lighting is much better.
Yep.
Go right ahead.
All right, so when we think about winter maintenance, it includes our winter weather response, which is snow removal 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And lately, that's not just snow removal, that's ice storms and rain events, followed by freeze events, followed by 70-degree weather, followed by, you know, it's been just really crazy.
Wind events.
Huh? Yeah.
Wind events.
The wind events have been horrendous. So this budget captures the overtime related to winter storm response, but not the regular time. It's based on having 5 main plow routes covering approximately 89 lane miles, managing 17 miles of sidewalks, 4 acres of municipal parking lots, another 4 acres of RSU 26 parking lots, staff working a maximum of 16 shifts, and all of the sand and salt that goes into that winter maintenance. So when we look this year, that $288,000 budget, the major cut there is you see that in the decision to not restock all of the sand that we would put up. So we're cutting back $5,000. It depletes a stockpile. Rob thinks he can get us through this year with what we have, but next year, if we use it this year, we're gonna have to make sure that $5,000 gets put back in so that we can put that stockpile back. Because if we use it, it's not there. Increasing the salt budget about $6,600, and I think Rob, when he spoke with me, talked about commodity price just going up, and he's very concerned about that pricing, which is why we put the extra money there. The staff, I'm going to remind you, just so, that the staffing reduction that you've already agreed to will be most felt in the winter maintenance services, resulting in significant sidewalk maintenance delays. And this is actually an increase from FY20 budget of about 3,500 or 2%, which is pretty much the lion's share in one budget line is the salt is causing a lot of that. Questions about winter maintenance?
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, if you deplete the sand and gravel, will $10,000 put that back at our whatever we have for a normal amount, or are we looking at a $15,000 or $20,000 hit?
I'm gonna let Rob take that.
I think the character of our response has changed a little bit. We don't use quite as much sand as we used to, so stocking the full volume of the shed could be a change that we make moving forward, and this winter will kind of indicate whether that's possible or not. I think we can fall back on if we need to haul some more sand, if we have a real intense winter and we need to go get some more, it's available. It's not easy to get in the wintertime, but it's possible to get in the wintertime. So there is a little bit of contingency there. The 10,000 for the following year should allow us to put a pretty good stock up, and what we're going to use, sort of the accumulation of what has been left over for the last 4 years. So it can be made up again relatively quickly.
I had a question for Rob, and it's just more your general observance or opinion. Are you finding that we're looking at a new normal with climate change? I think our April was probably a little bit warmer than we were used to. And do you think that that's going to impact, the town at all in the winter? Either budget-wise or weather-wise.
When we build our budgets, we look at about a 35 event, 100-inch snow accumulation season. That's over the last 12 years, I've kept data on that. And it's proven out to be pretty much surprisingly consistent, depending on how the year goes, of course. But an average year is about 35 events with about 100 inches of snow. Last year we got 36 events with only 82.5 inches of snow. So last year was a little bit different. A little bit of a change from the norm, particularly with the character of the events in January and February. You got to keep in mind on April 9th, not August 9th. On April 9th, we got an 11-inch snowstorm. So, the winter season has proven to be as unpredictable as it can be. But if you look at it over a 10 or 12 year period, snow events are trending to be a little less intense in terms of accumulation. We only had 5 events this year that accumulated more than 6 inches of snow. However, the frequency continues, and that the type of event that we're dealing with is changing, Cheryl, a bit, in that we're seeing, we see our region, the Bangor region, tends to be a little bit closer to that mixing line. So we see a bunch of different types of precipitation over the course of an event, where it used to be, you'd get a nice clean 6-inch snowstorm, it'd be over in 12 hours, and the sun would come out and you'd clean it up. When you're dealing with sleet and slush and ice and rain, and then it's going to be cold the next day or whatever it might be, it changes the way we respond to events. And so we're kind of adjusting to that a bit. And that's the sand use is kind of one of the indications of that we're needing to use more consistently salt applications to keep the ice from freezing to the road. Whereas if you have a 10 or 12-inch snowstorm in the middle of that, you don't put out a lot of salt because there's no sense in trying to keep the roads bare when it's snowing. So, it's changing things, and it's something that we're ready for, I guess.
And I feel like we've had more, and I said this, wind events in the last 2 years or 3 years with branches down and trees down and power out for days, sometimes. I don't know how that impacts our public works or your winter maintenance. But it feels like it. You see it from a different angle because you're in it. My other question was, what is your timeline? Like, when do you typically like 36 events feels like a lot to me. So when did they usually start? In like November, October?
Well, this year our first event was in October. It tends to be sometime in November through, at the latest, the middle of, I call the winter season November 1st to April 15th. And you're going to get some outliers on either side of those dates. But that's pretty much the general limits of the season.
Thank you, Rob.
So we can confirm that in Orono, winter is 5.5 months long. Your data.
Yep.
That's what we budget for. You know how that works. We took the plows off this week. We're not putting them back on.
You ready for me to continue on, or more questions?
I think we're ready.
I just wanted to point out before we move on past winter maintenance that kind of reiterate the issue with eliminating the position. I think what that's going to lead to, the most noticeable thing, like Sophie mentioned, is our ability to be flexible in our response to sidewalk maintenance, our ability to prioritize that part of our storm cleanup is going to be affected. One of the ways that we could think about reducing that delay is reducing the amount of parking lots that we have to do. I think once we get finished with our road work, we quickly transition. A lot of the equipment is similar, and we're able to transition to parking lot cleanup relatively quickly. But 4 acres of our 8 acres of total responsibility belongs to the RSU. And I think that represents a couple hours at least. Maybe you could cut our delay to sidewalk maintenance in half if we didn't have the responsibility to do the RSU parking lots as well. It's something to consider. It's not, Public Works has always done the school parking lots. We don't bill the school department to do that work. And so if we're reducing elements of our level of service, that may be a place that council may want to look at as well.
Yeah, in the past, we've talked about how, then the RSU would just hire plowing services and bill the town for it anyway. So 6 of one, half dozen of the other. But I don't know if perhaps, since we're talking about an actual service reduction, that it's not worth at least considering, that option.
The benefit of splitting the two out, there are 2 benefits. One is that you would get to focus on sidewalks right away. And one of the things we've been striving for is to really support the walkability of our town and people who would walk places and be able to do that right away as quickly after a snowstorm as possible. And the other benefit would be that it ends up going into the school budget so that it's clear that that's a service that the town has been providing for the school. And now that we are actually 2 separate entities, even though it goes overall into the town's budget, it would be very clear that that's a cost we've been covering before.
It would seem to me, Sophie, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but the timing of that discussion is going to be tough. The school department has finalized their budget. They certainly have not been considering this as an additional expense.
Oh yes, I wasn't suggesting that would be a this year conversation. Yeah, I think that ship is probably sailed, but in the past we haven't really talked about it much just because it didn't seem like it was worthwhile. But going forward, if we really hear a lot of blowback from residents about the sidewalk maintenance, then it's something that we probably need to consider early next year.
That makes sense.
I agree with that conversation. I was about to make that same point before Tom stole my thunder. Okay.
So Tom, so Tom.
Rob, if we were to find some money in the fall, or if there was some federal money that came through, how long do you need some running time to train someone to do sidewalks?
Well, I guess depending on who you find, it's always a little bit different. The sidewalk machines are all a little bit different, but ultimately you kind of learn as you go as it is. It's when you're learning how to run a piece of equipment, the best way to do it is hop in and take it for a ride. So, I think given the right person, this, it could happen relatively quickly. Say a 2-week period, we could have them ready. The challenge will be finding that person in the fall for a temporary position. I don't know what the labor market's going to look like, in the fall once we get through this process. But I know before all of this, labor markets were tough. It was really difficult to find quality people because everyone was working. And so we may look for somebody and not be able to fill it. And that would be the concern. But, if council wanted to try to restore that position later this year, ultimately we can try, and it wouldn't really matter when. We can get them in the fold and get them trained up as soon as possible.
That's just my wishful thinking at this point. We don't know what will happen. Sophie, you want to move on to cemetery, or is there
That
any
was
other-
truly me trying to move speakers around, not trying to give you a cue, so you know. But yes, we can if you'd like.
Anybody have any other questions on winter maintenance? Moving on.
Sorry, right now we have a position that's not filled. And is our budget saying that we will hold filling that position, or are we proposing to fill it as soon as he can fill it?
No, this is the one, Lori, that we had the conversation for better part of a workshop on, the shared public works WPCF position. We actually have somebody in that position right now. But Greg Daigle, who worked for the town for 23 years, was a pretty talented equipment operator. Unfortunately, due to health reasons, had to get done. So he was actually a lead in the Public Works Department. We had reclassified that position as a equipment operator, and it was vacant, with an anticipated vacancy. And what the council decided to do was to actually reclassify our shared laborer position to a regular laborer position, 100% with Public Works, and then hope that we can get somebody licensed and trained to be able to promote from within to the equipment operator position and leave that shared position vacant. That shared position is as important for Joe Madigan this year to not have that funded. His budget is very, very tight this year. And so we are hoping that with the restoration of the economy, that we'll be able to see our revenues for WPCF go up and more revenue sharing that will allow us to restore the position. Can I continue, or are there more questions?
Thank you.
So cemeteries, we've got the Riverside Cemetery. A couple of years ago, we actually brought all the maintenance for that back in-house. We had been contracting that out. Mike Smart is our cemetery superintendent. He does an amazing job with Rob's guidance. But there is a lot of record keeping, internments, and having to work very closely with the public and the various funeral homes to run the cemetery, as well as to maintain the grounds. State law is actually incredibly explicit on how cemeteries have to be maintained, and I would say we are definitely meeting that, if not exceeding that requirement right now. So we're talking about a total budget of $6,100. There's no significant change anticipated here, and it's a decrease of about $550 or 2%. And I don't know if people have questions or concerns that they'd like to talk about related to cemeteries.
I just have a quick question about toilets.
Toilets.
Always fun to talk about. Only because, I mean, it's been part of our conversations about Gould's Landing, but there is a nominal increase in some fees for grub treatment and portable toilet rental, I assume, for cemetery.
The portable toilet rental is, while the public might use it, it's actually for our employees because they're stationed out there for whole days at a time and kind of sort of need a place to do their business.
Oh, yes. My question is really just around if one of the reasons that we are telling the public that they cannot access Gould's Landing the way they have is about bathroom facilities. I just want to make sure that we're not doing one thing in one part of town and a different thing in another part of town. So can you just talk a little bit about what the difference might be in the portable toilet that we have at the cemetery versus Gould's Landing? Or that we don't currently have at Gould's Landing?
So I think, we're working through this, Megan. I just read new guidance from the feds around sanitation of portable toilets. I think the difference is going to be in signage when we get it out there, because I don't think we are going to clean. We don't have the resources to clean, but it looks like under the federal CDC guidance, we can get away with simply letting people know that they have to bring their own hand sanitizer and that the portable toilets are only going to be cleaned once a week. And so we would put that up. If we had concerns at the cemetery, we might end up locking it so it's only accessible by employees until we have that plan. But I guess that's kind of the thought.
What I hear you saying is that in the cemetery, because it's largely used by staff and there is a staff presence there, that is a different scenario than just putting a public toilet up in the woods with no staff that we can afford.
Absolutely.
Yes. Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Any other questions about the cemetery?
I just add that I know it was not part of the budget. It was part of the funds we have for maintenance of the cemetery that are outside of the budget. But the work that was done last year and is continuing this year has been a tremendous improvement with that. Is it Thomas or Thompson who's been doing that work?
Thomas
Stevens.
Thomas Stevens. I know there was a Thomas on that sign.
So there's kind of two parts to that project. I was going to mention it before we moved on. Thanks for bringing it up. The straightening and repair of all of the stones is now basically complete. But then another part of it, which could probably be more work than the first half, is cleaning up and taking care of all of the heaved and moved foundations. So stones that just needed to be righted or repaired are done. Now we're moving on to probably the harder phase of the project where they'll come back and either remove and replace or adjust about 30 or 35 foundations for some of the more dramatically moved frost heaves and things like that. So they're about halfway done, I would say.
Great.
If we're ready to go on?
Yep. Rob's
fast here. So solid waste, we are required by state law to have an ability for people to dispose of their municipal solid waste, also affectionately known as MSW. So in Orono, we do that a few different ways. The first, we have a weekly curbside residential MSW collection. Any properties that have 3 units or more are required to contract for their own collection of waste. We have bi-weekly curbside residential recycling collection. We have a construction demolition debris landfill out on Taylor Road. And we also manage the closed MSW landfill, which is adjacent to the open CDD landfill. So the solid waste budget's about $324,000. We are actually maintaining a status quo. We made the transition to the Coastal Resources of Maine facility, which is having some growing pains, and we are really not ready to advocate for any change. We right now are on a bypass order, so our recycling, Rob has made arrangements to have that go through the Casella Zero Sort, which is going to cost us a little bit more, well, a lot more, but it will ensure that our recycling, once picked up, does not go to landfill. The increases in this budget are mostly associated with landfill monitoring expenses, which are required as part of the closed landfill license and follow-up. The MSW and also our MSW fee, disposal fees increased. So there's an escalation in there for that. And that's contractual. So overall, we're looking at an increase in the solid waste budget from FY20 of about $7,600, or OAT, which should be or 2%. Questions about solid waste?
Oh, sorry, I can't figure out how to unmute. Yeah. So in the Bangor Daily, I think it was like May 12th, there was an article that said that CRM is having a significant financial problems to the extent that they couldn't pay back their $1.5 million loan that they had borrowed from the MRC, and their how do I want to say this? The future of CRM seems a little tentative at best. So what happens to municipal budgets? What happens to municipal waste if we come into a situation where they don't become operable again? I understand that they are they're challenged right now in keeping this going, and that they will be closed for the month of July. And that's my understanding. I don't know the gory details.
Yeah, so I always give this disclosure in case there are people who don't know, but I serve as a director on the Municipal Review Committee, which is the entity that the town actually contracts with as a cohort of municipalities that make up the MRC. So the MRC actually earlier this week issued a notice of default to Coastal Resources of Maine, saying that they are not living up to their piece of the their contractual obligations to the MRC, which means to us, because we are, all the municipalities make up the MRC. The town of Orono has a contractual obligation with the MRC. So the MRC has stepped in. They are currently working with the bondholders, so the people who actually put the money up for the facility, and are charting a path forward. I spent a few hours on phone call today with MRC at a special meeting. They are charting a path forward. We are required to give CRM 30 days to try to cure their default, and are based on what we are seeing. If CRM is unable to cure the default, we still are seeing, still have a relatively high degree of confidence that this project can be made to work, and that there are funders behind it that will allow it to work. So yes, CRM is having problems, but it's not just about CRM, and the way that they borrowed the money for the facility allows the people who put the money up to step in and run the plant. So what we need to do is wait for the 4 weeks. The town needs to watch what MRC is doing. And if MRC is not living up to its obligation, which is to provide a place for us to dispose of the waste, then we absolutely can start looking at whether or not we stay with the contract that we sign, or if we want to try to exit that. At this point, I have every confidence that we will be able to move forward, Cheryl, and that this is temporary. I also know there's an awful lot of work happening behind the scenes right now to try to find a solution that we would all agree with.
And is, oh, go ahead.
No, I just hope we do get to this solution. This has been going on for a long time, and if it doesn't resolve soon, I think we're going to have to start exploring other options of what we can do. And I mean, I've had concerns, although I haven't expressed them really, about what is happening with our waste, and especially with the new guidelines that came out last year. I do hope it works out. It would be wonderful if this works out, but I'm kind of losing faith, and I hope I'm wrong. Also, I do need to point out, I do need to leave at 5 o'clock. I let both Sophie and Cindy know this is a Wednesday thing for me. I'm sorry, but I will be listening to the recording later. I hope you don't miss me too much.
We will, Sam. And so, Sophie, along those lines, and kind of echoing what Sam said, what kind of alternatives is the MRC looking at right now? If this, I mean, I'm assuming there's like a backup plan, right?
So I can tell you that MRC has always been key on a backup plan for the backup plan. But where they are right now, Cheryl, I can't speak to that publicly.
Okay.
I will be able to in a couple weeks, but I can't right now.
Is it going to impact our budget at all? Since we have to be done with this?
I don't think so. As I look at what is happening, Cheryl, if it does, if I'm wrong, we have that solid waste reserve that we specifically put aside to help us if we ran into problems with this transition. And so that had, I don't have it in front of me, but it was right around, well, actually I do have it right in front of me. Give me just 1 second. That was about $88,000. So we've got some money to help us there.
Okay. I guess we just have to wait.
So I just want a specific question, which is the second bullet says increases associated with landfill monitoring expenses and MSW disposal fee escalation. We have an agreement with them that we're sending our waste to them, and that's how we plan for the future. We assume how much waste, because we keep track of how much waste we send to them, and so we assume how much we send in the future, and we have a deal with them. So did we know that there would be this fee escalation, or is this something that was added on to the original deal we had with them?
No, it's part of the contract that the council agreed to.
Okay, so it's just
Pulled,
incrementally, there's
that-
increased costs over time.
that escalation is based on the consumer price index for the industry.
Okay, thank you.
And that, I'll add, that also includes our contract with Pine Tree Waste. We set forth a 5-year plan that included an increase each year as part of that contract as well. And so that's part of that $7,600 as well.
And before we leave the topic, or before we go off the topic, I think what's really important to me as well is that if there is an alternative, that we really adhere to the hierarchy, to the Maine State Waste hierarchy, and landfilling should be the last place that we go to.
So one thing, Cheryl, that I did ask, because, for full disclosure, you and I've had this conversation already once today, in terms of prepping, and I appreciate that, to make sure that I would have what you needed. But I sought clarity around what is the difference between temporary and not temporary. And I think the town is obligated to hang in with MRC through a temporary closure. And we can have a difference of opinion on where that line is. And when we think we're getting to that line where it's not reasonable to be temporary, then we absolutely can take steps to protect the town. And I can take my MRC hat off and we can do that. But I don't think anybody would reasonably say that the next 4 weeks is not temporary. And I think that after 4 weeks, it really depends on what the MRC can come out and tell us the plan is, because more than a month without any kind of plan doesn't feel quite as temporary as it's just another 2 weeks or another, because here's the plan, and then we can judge from there.
Right. And my last concern, I always have concerns, but this one is that this applies to all 115 municipalities, not just Orono.
Yep.
And so we don't want to make sure that all municipalities are not simply landfilling it at Juniper Ridge.
Yep.
That's a lot of waste
Yep.
going there. That's a lot of waste going into the landfill.
Yep. Absolutely, I agree. Ready to move on?
Sophie, I have 2 questions.
Sure.
One, you had talked about Rob paying more for managing them through Casella. And I was wondering where that was in the budget, if there was a budget increase for that.
So there isn't a budget increase because in the past, Cindy, the authorization we had from council, which I was falling back on, was in a situation like this, if we ended up having to go to zero sort, which is about $100 more a ton, that we could take that from the reserve if we ran over budget. And we had talked about that when a year ago, and I just assumed that that was still council's preference.
Yep. Okay.
So to put the scale, so it is about $100 per ton difference. Orono recycles about 20 ton a month. So it's about a $2,000 increase. The way the expenditures were trending in our tipping fee accounts, I think we'll be able to absorb that, but we will see.
Great, thank you. And the other question is, I wonder if you could speak about the mattress demolition and how that's affecting free dump week, and whether at what point do we need to rethink the free dump weekend? Not that I want to lose it.
That's a good Rob question.
So I guess talking about, when I think about the best use of the space that is finite in our landfill, probably one of the least efficient landfillable items is a mattress. It is very difficult to compact. There's a lot of different components to it. It's got metal and wood and fiber and plastics. And so getting as many, and we tend to take quite a few of those in over the course of a free weekend. So getting as many of those out of our landfill to make sure that we use that space as efficiently as possible is important. So considering what we pay for the 2 weekends in the spring and the second in the fall, to reserve about what probably saves about 100 yards a year in volume into our CDD landfill makes sense.
Do you think we'll ever reach a point where we'll need to charge for disposing of mattresses?
You mean during the no ticket weekend?
Yeah.
Well, I guess that would be up to you all. We take, like I said, 40-yard container full of mattresses leaves the landfill that weekend each time. So I don't know what the numbers would look like, but I mean, it's a possibility. You could consider that.
So the challenge is not that everything's free. It's just that on those weekends, we get these things that we don't keep at our own landfill, so we have to pay to tip them somewhere else. Normally,
Yeah.
if people bring mattresses, they're paying to tip their waste so that it's captured. Is that so? Because I guess I'm not, because one thing is we could say we just don't accept mattresses at our landfill. Another is that we have a charge for mattresses and they're not free even on the free weekend. And that would then reduce our having to put out money to get rid of mattresses when we don't bring any in.
Yes, council could choose to do that.
I mean, I think
I would be interested in hearing how the new system is worked, Rob, in terms of the permits and the fees that we've been installed this past year.
Okay. Can I just jump in first, just to let you know that Rob and I are suggesting a change, but we think it's within what council likes with that, Tom. Council will be happy. It's that we have people coming in a variety of times of the year, and we're thinking that still having stickers that expire. So you buy a $25 sticker, it goes on your car. If you buy it July 1st, that is good till the following December. So a sticker that you buy this year would be good until December of 2021 is our thought. So it would be an 18-month sticker. And that we have given away 2 cubic yards without charging people. So when they buy the sticker, they get the sticker and 2 cubic yard tickets. So from there, Rob, would you like to talk about how it's working?
Well, I think operationally it's been good. I think it has led to people thinking about what goes in their load when they are planning to go to the landfill, which I think one of the key parts of managing solid waste on a personal level is thinking about what you're throwing away, and is there a better way to get rid of it than just dumping it in our landfill. So I think volumes are down a little bit, which, is going to extend the life, the life of the landfill, which I think is a good thing. When I say the life of it, it's not going to take us as long. It'll take us a little longer to fill it up. There is a finite volume there. It's not a time thing. It's when it's full, it's going to be full, and council will need to decide whether they choose to expand it or not at that point. Not to say that this transition hasn't been challenging at times, because we've had some strange circumstances associated with, for some of the events, the first event free weekend, no ticket weekend that we had, 3/4 of the town didn't have power. And so they couldn't, including the town office, I believe. So people couldn't go get their stickers. And then of course, this year with our reaction to COVID and the town office being closed, we've had to rely on online services, which I think may turn out to be one of the positive silver lining things that come out of this, is expanding our online services so that you can buy landfill tickets and permits online. Has really helped people access the landfill a lot easier. So overall, I think it's been a positive change. Like I said, we've added tires to our list of acceptable items out there now. 2 tires is a ticket. Scrap metal is accepted at no additional cost as long as you have an access permit, as well as leaves and brush. And we're nearly ready to roll out our universal waste program. Still working out some of the final details of that, but we'll be looking to accept things like mercury switches, televisions, fluorescent bulbs, those kinds of things out there too. So able to expand our acceptable materials list without increasing costs. So that's been good.
Ready to move on? Yes, all right. I'm looking at you, Cheryl. Okay. So the final piece of the Public Works budget is the fleet maintenance facility. And in the past, you may recall this was labeled the town garage, but in this budget, you're dealing with all of the fleet maintenance, so all of the repair pieces, but also all that it costs to keep the new Public Works facility up, running, and to maintain it. So I just gave you the laundry list on the side of kind of what is involved, which you see is not a small list. So when you think about that budget of 200, and I can't see it anymore, I'm sorry. There you go, $236,060. That actually includes the full-time mechanic, all of his wages and benefits, as well as all of the things that he needs to actually repair vehicles. So if we lose a part or need a part, that comes out of that budget. Also, it includes all the electricity and general maintenance costs associated with the garage. So this year, there is an increase in the facility and HVAC maintenance costs, and that's just, Rob has been trying to dial this in as we bring the facility online, and as it ages, there are also some things that need to be done just as a matter of good stewardship. So overall, there's a 1% increase, or $3,475 in this account. Any questions about facility?
I just have one. Well, first of all, kind of curiosity, what's happened to the facility on Penobscot Street? Has that been cleaned up and done? Are we done with that one yet?
So it's cleaned up council sent Dave off on a mission to try to find a private sector developer to do, you decided you didn't just want to put a sign out front. And so Dave has tried that with the economy where it is. All of those leads have just totally dried up. So we've tried to secure it the best we can. And I think the plan that we have at this point is to let it wait for a little bit and see if council wants to rethink and move more towards getting it off our rolls and onto the tax rolls without trying to get to that highest and best use.
And my other question is, how old is our new facility? I don't remember when that went into play.
We moved in December of 2015.
Oh, you're muted.
So we're
So 5 years then, almost 5 years.
4.5 years old so far.
Yeah, wow, okay. Time flies.
Sophie, on the paperwork that I'm looking at from the budget notebook, it says the proposed budget is 243,560, and you have 236,60. So I'm just
Yeah, so on your revision list, one of the things that we did, we had actually put in a very extensive duct cleaning project, which would have increased that significantly. We pulled that out thinking that we would put that in next year. Because as Rob says, it's a 5 to 7 years. So we're thinking about it in year 5 and hope to be able to do it in year 6. That's one of those things that we're not going to want to push too far, Cindy, because that air handling system, they deal with many of the same things that the fire departments does. And remember, we started to get people not feeling well because the stuff got caked up into the ductwork there. So we want to make sure we do get that clean, but Rob felt comfortable pulling that down this year.
So I thought we had approved that for this year already. You're saying that we didn't end up doing it this year?
No, we did that in Public Works and, I'm sorry, we did that in Public Safety and Municipal Building. That was not the Public Works Building.
Oh, I see.
We ready to move on or more questions?
nope, we're ready.
Yeah, what did I do? Here we go. So overall, the Public Works Cost Center is about $1.7 million, and there's a decrease of $70,000 or 4% between the FY20 budget and where we are right now in the FY21 budget draft. Okay. And my understanding is you also wanted to potentially have some conversation with Rob around capital infrastructure.
Yep.
I think that was a Tom. So when we look at capital infrastructure, we actually have two major funding sources of the infrastructure. I am just pulling out the FY21 infrastructure plan. So it's the FY21 budget for the 5-year infrastructure plan. So in that budget, we had originally put aside for this year 400,000, or not put aside, we were requesting $400,000 to complete the next phase of the North Main Avenue project. Recall we spent $295,000 last year, or this year that we're in, and now we were going to do $400,000. The current budget draft reflects a request to look at splitting that $400,000 in half, so we would raise $200,000 in FY21 and $200,000 in FY22. Talking with Rob, that plan would look seamless to the outside world because we would bid it next spring, start the work, have $200,000 to pay for it, as long as we knew that we were going to have the final $200,000 in the coming year to pay for it at the end of the construction season. It includes Forest Avenue. This was actually a much higher budget item because it included, fixing it completely and doing a complete job. The $125,000 in here right now takes us from essentially from Noyes Drive to the start of or the end of the urban compact on Forest Ave, which the state is going to pave its portion of Forest Ave this year. At least they're slated to, which starts at the compact line. So this is not a complete road job. This is an overlay, and Rob can talk about that in just a minute. The College Avenue Sidewalk project, this is many years in the making, and we have a few more after this. We've been putting aside $25,000 a year, and Rob and the crew have been managing rebuilding pieces of the sidewalk every year. The miscellaneous accounts, this is where miscellaneous roads, miscellaneous curbs, miscellaneous stormwater, miscellaneous electrical, all kind of fall into the miscellaneous accounts, and they are between $5,000 and $30,000 each. Those miscellaneous accounts are what allow Rob to respond to the things when they need to happen, when we need to fix something that can't make it through, or because a sinkhole opens up, or because the transformer or the control switch on the parking lot lights dies, or fill in the or. Those are absolutely critical, and Rob does a masterful job managing those accounts. The other financing sources that we have in this budget are TIFs. So we have a Main Street sidewalk project that right now has a total price tag of about $500,000. My sense is that might go up a little bit by the time we're done. We have that split in the budget with 20% or $100,000 in this year's budget coming out of the downtown and transit-oriented TIF district, and the $400,000 for next year coming out of the general fund taxes. I think Rob is trying to look at this project for some potential pedestrian safety money or DOT money, which might help us offset the second piece of this. And then finally, Godfrey Drive paving has also, we would use the EnvisionNet tax increment financing district to pay for that paving. And if anybody's had the pleasure of trying to drive down that road, you would see that that is not one that I think we can reasonably push out. Just to remind folks that might not have experience working with the TIF district funds, but those are not funds that we can just reallocate to other projects in the plan. That any project that could reasonably be looked at for TIF funds, we have allocated TIF funds to this year. So I don't know what kind of questions you have for Rob. I will give you the budget breakdown. Rob is the person that knows the projects.
So I was glad to hear that in the North Main Avenue project, that splitting that over a 2-year period, the public will really not see any difference because we weren't going to put it out to bid until spring anyway.
So what people will see, Tom, is it will be a year.
Right.
So it will be a year. They won't get anything this year, but next year.
What this change does is effectively move the project back 1 year.
Yeah.
Because we were ready to bid it now, and could have done it this year if the funds were available. So.
Gotcha.
Are there any infrastructure projects that we've pushed back a year besides North Main Avenue?
Well, I think pending council's decision on the FY21 work plan, we would then work our way back from there. There are some changes, particularly, Sophie, I don't know if you want to talk about the change in the way we plan to fund or would like to plan to fund the Route 2 culvert project that might make room for this $200,000 shift without having to necessarily push back anything else. But Sophie, you understand the details of that one a little bit better.
Sure. So one of the things that we can look at is that we have extra money assigned for the 3 Godfrey Drive bond repayment. We actually took the beginning year and not the ending year balance on that. So those funds could cover the costs of the culvert if we decided that we wanted to do that. So that's a thought. And I think we would probably want to wait until the bond is repaid and you get to the end of the fiscal year or you get into the budget process, at least know where we are with fund balance. But that does exist, so you might not have to go back out to the taxpayers to ask for the culvert money. So just a thought.
Good thought.
Any other questions on capital infrastructure? So when we look at Public Works, I will just say that we in Orono are very fortunate to have the team that we do. Rob and his crew do an incredible job, and there's a level of professionalism there that talking with other town managers, not everybody is as fortunate as we are. And I think we can do all that we do in large part due to the management and the people that we have staffing that department.
And I would add to, Sophie tends to send some compliments my way that I haven't necessarily earned because it's the staff that's out there working every day, out there sweeping and picking up brush and mowing and, that really make this department shine. So I tend to get, a little, I don't like to take compliments that I haven't necessarily earned, but I would just say that our staff really is fantastic. And the work that we get done on such a tight budget really is indicative of their dedication to this community. So.
And Rob, can I thank you for the narrative? Like that, that was a great read. But it was very detailed, and that's very helpful for me too. So thank you for that.
So that's what we have, folks. At this point, the budget reflects the major changes that we talked about in Rob's department. And I don't know what else you might like to talk about.
Well, I just had a couple items. So is our workman's comp through Mimic?
No, we do workers' comp through Maine Municipal Association.
Because the general maintenance had gone up 52%, and I'm familiar with when they that seems awfully.
So a part of the issue with MMA is we budget, so we get one bill and we budget based on the cost centers. They, depending on who audits, and we just changed into a new auditing company for the workers' comp, they reclassified a bunch of our stuff. So what you'll see is some places we went up, Terry, and in other places we went down.
Okay. And secondly, I was looking at at the front end when we were looking at stuff like commercial recycling, commercial organics, and solid waste and stuff like that. And that would be dumpsters for businesses, correct? That we're not responsible for. At the front end when we have the stuff that's all highlighted of.
Yep. So in his
and
OMR?
we're in a tier 2 for.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's because we have no curbside collection. I was assuming that was responsibility of the people there.
Yes.
So when I saw this, I also want to put it out there as one of the things that I have heard from citizens about. We'll use the public place where all the restaurants are. That there is concern that those dumpsters are not in a central location, that people are just dumping stuff and it becomes kind of a waste issue. So I don't know whose responsibility that is, but I was going to kind of pass that on.
Yeah, I know that Dave Mylan and Mitch have been trying to work with some businesses around how we might be able to downsize the total number of dumpsters that are there and put them, like we had talked about, maybe trying to get them behind a fence. And so if they were screened, you get a lot less people just dumping into it, that kind of thing. But those do not belong to us, and the businesses are paying on their own for that. So we kind of have to get businesses to agree with us. And right now, they had started down that path, and then COVID-19 kind of made them take a sharp turn. But we do intend to get back to that, because what we'd like to see is if we could get the businesses to all work together, and maybe it's that the town takes on the actual cost of the dumpsters and includes it into our contract with Pine Tree, and then bills out the communities based on an agreed upon assessment. But to get them behind some a locked fence would probably be a very good thing. So the only people that had access to them were the people that should be dumping there.
Thank you.
So I guess people are going to ponder the public infrastructure for a little bit.
So we're scheduled, Cindy, to come back and talk about the capital plan itself. Because remember, that plan isn't just the FY21 budget. You adopt a 5-year plan. And I think it's important for us to take some time next Monday and actually go through that plan, because how we set that up really gives Rob an awful lot of information on how he should be planning and working things through. It shouldn't just be words on a page. We should actually really think about it and make sure that it's going to be something that is feasible in the future years. Not holding you to it, but making it a little bit easier for Rob to plan and get things in place. If that works.
Yeah. Sophie, one of the things I've been wondering, and maybe you've done this already and my brain's just not working. So there's certain things that you're going, if we don't replace that next year, we'll be in serious trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have any list or anything that we could maybe look at? My concern, I'm wondering whether, if we bring this budget down so low that next year it's just going to balloon, should we be looking at a balancing act?
So in the overview report that I gave you, those tier 1 cuts are the things that we think need to be added back in. And then we've done a couple of things since then, and I can update that list and get it back out to council if that would be helpful. But I think I've tried to nibble around that very thought, Cindy, is that in an effort to bring the budget down, we had anticipated, a $500,000 growth in revenue sharing that we had hoped to pass along, perhaps some more tax relief, but also to fund the fire department's organizational change that we've all agreed to. And we brought a small portion of that on this year's budget, but next year is where the lion's share of that will come in. So I'm really concerned that we're hitting a cliff here. And I don't know how you want to talk about it. My sense from council was that what you were saying is you don't really want to make any major decisions this year and you'd like to take a pause. So that's what I've tried to do. And the other thing that whether I am reading between the lines and getting it wrong, but what I've heard was a real desire to try to get the municipal side of the tax rate down to 0. And you still have another $27,065 to go to be able to do that.
Yep. Well, maybe we can have that when we get through the whole budget.
Yep.
Cindy,
Yeah, I will. Oh,
I was actually having the same concerns, and my mind always kind of registers this way about, do we continually keep saying, we all know that we're in a situation that's not good, but where's the balance in, like, I don't want to get behind, because I look at certain spaces and I'm out and about walking around and running and stuff like that, and I see it and I'm like going, okay, we've talked about this and it looks bad, and I think sometimes we can look at this definitely a little bit more, but I think there is a bit of concessions that need to be made for the situation that we're in, and whether or not it's even a good idea to go completely to 0, because I really do worry about falling behind, and I don't want to put Public Works in this space where all of a sudden they're going to look at us in a couple years going like, we talked about this 2 years ago. So glad you bring this up.
So would it be helpful if for our discussion next week, and I think on Monday we need to decide whether we need a Wednesday meeting, because I think I had set aside Wednesday for council special projects, and then Thursday for wrap up, and we already did council special projects. So I'm wondering if on Monday we can decide if we need that Wednesday meeting. We know Sam can't participate in it. And then, so after our meeting on Monday, we could talk about, I could get you the information around kind of what I would project the needs are for next year, knowing that right now we're working, a year in advance. Next year will be another whole year, but at least I could talk a little bit about some of the knowns that I see and some of the things that we took out that would really need to go back in next year. So you could then decide. But I could also share with you where I think revenue sharing might be, which might not be so bad.
Yep. That makes good sense.
So
As long as,
go ahead.
I was gonna say, as long as you promise not to hold me to this, because I do not have a crystal ball and I don't have any answers. But I'm happy to share guesses with you.
So I just want to respond to yours, saying that you heard the general feeling is that we wanted the municipal budget to not increase and come back with no increase relative to last year. And I guess I'm in the minority on that. My goal is that we fund things that are we feel are essential for the town, and that we're very clear about that our goal is to provide services, and those services have costs. And so I'm not as adamant that we come to 0 as we are that we evaluate and make it very clear the list of things that aren't getting funded to get us to 0, so that people in the town can weigh in about how they feel about those. So for example, in the last meeting, we talked about the library, and one of the ways we would keep the budget low is to not fund a half-time position. We all agreed that we did want to fund the other position that was a possibility to not fund. But my goal would be to make sure that we fund the services that we people have come accustomed to, and know that there's cost to that.
My question is how close is the school board to finalizing their budget, or have they done that yet?
I think the school board's draft is pretty final. I think what they're waiting for right now is guidance from the state and potentially another executive order from Governor Mills around how they have to go through the referendum process in this COVID-19 era. But my sense in the conversations, and I don't want to make it sound like they're extensive because Meredith has been really busy too. But my sense is that they are pretty well through their process. And again, that's just my sense.
Thank you.
Great. I think we might be ready to move to brief town manager update.
So I want to let you know that Chief Ewing and Mitch and Jeff Lowe and Dave Mylan are all working together on trying to get us a plan to be able to safely open the parks in some form or fashion. And I think with regard to Gould's Landing and Netto Savoy Park, we're really starting to look at them, although they are one place on the face, you know, they sit next to each other. They're really two separate activities happening. And so my first request for them was to get me a plan so that we can open up parking a little bit more for the landing. So people who have canoes and kayaks can go out and park. We're probably going to end up doing that through a permit system. And so I'm working with staff to try to figure out how we can affect that most reasonably electronically so that we don't have to have a bunch of people coming in or people waiting for a long time. My thought is there's very limited space out there, very limited activity. And if we are able to open the park, we're still going to be limited, not to the 50 people. You look at 6 feet of area, and although people want to talk about the swimming out there, that's not really a swimming. There is erosion. That is not a beach. That is an erosion area. We're very clear with our insurance company that that's an erosion area. And so we want to make sure that we have enough space and try to figure out what that limit is so that we can put appropriate signs out there. So there is a plan, kind of 2 stages. One is to open up parking a little bit, and the second is to figure out how we might be able to open up and manage the Netto Savoy Park as well. So
Do the vehicles that have trailers that are putting boats in, do they have to get a permit to occupy those spaces?
no, because they are for trailer. It's very easy to limit the parking there because you can only park in those spaces if you have trailers. If you wanted to limit it, I am concerned about trying to limit that aspect of the boat landing to resident or non-resident, given the grant funds that we got there. So
The citizen that wrote in about not being able to park somewhere because to put in their non-motorized vehicle.
that is
Kayak.
exactly what I'm talking about, Lori. That's why we're looking at trying to expand parking.
But they would have to get a permit to park, and the people who have a trailer don't have to get a permit to park? Is that what you're saying?
I am suggesting that we have permit parking out there.
For anyone who parks out there?
At this point, I'm not even there yet. I'm just suggesting we have permit parking out there. And I'm not suggesting that we necessarily charge for it. I am seeing it more as a control of how many people are out there.
So the other parking spots that aren't for the trailers, I haven't been out there to see. So, but from this letter, it sounds like they were blocked. All the rest of the parking is blocked off.
Yes.
So couldn't we just move some of it and put signs that say this is only for people who are putting boats in?
That's what we're looking at, Lori. That's what we're looking at. That's what we're trying to get the plan for. The plan of, number one, how do we get some parking for canoers, kayakers, people who want to dive off the end of the dock. I'm sorry, the insurance company, we don't do that, and swim across the lake, we don't do that. But people who are not going to be just hanging out at Netto Savoy, we need to look at this in 2 different stages. One is how do we deal with allowing a little bit more access, for the landing. And then the second question is, how can we safely invite people back to Meadow Savoy? And knowing that there are very limited numbers, I would suggest that we limit that to the people who are paying the tax bill that manages and maintains Meadow Savoy.
That makes sense to me, Sophie. I often wonder if, when I first saw that if this is just a situational thing right now. Typically, it's been there for how long? It's never been an issue. People may be chopping at the bit. I'm not like really interested in going restructuring stuff. But if you want everybody to be in the same pool, the same playing field, then if it's a standard thing that you're looking at, I can see that, because I think this is more or less just a situational thing. So, but I'm glad that you're looking at it that way.
All right. The second thing is, we had a final announcement from the University of Maine that summer camps are not going to be allowed. Tried to work with my contact to see if we could collaborate with the university to provide some sort of programming off campus, but using their staff resource to be able to do that. And the answer at this point is no, but in their guidance, they offer a waiver. They say we can apply for a waiver. So who knows if it's a waiver that you'll get or a waiver that they put out there so that they can go through a vetting process, but it's really a very narrow window. Either way, I'm probably going to pick up the phone and have a conversation with Kenda Shealy, who is the Associate Dean for Student Life, which is where the rec center kind of reports up through, just to find out. It would be much easier for the town to provide some Parks and Rec services in this incredible void if we had some help from university staffing to be able to do that. But if we can't, we will find another way forward. I mean, we've got to be able to roll out some things. LGBTQ Sculptures, we have a beautiful zebra out front. There's a unicorn hanging out and a giraffe in town as well. And I just want to make council aware that the town is participating with the group that's putting these on to, so there will be some social media posts that will hit explaining what the sculptures actually mean, because that always drives me nuts when I drive by something and I see and it must be there for a reason and I have no idea. So when those social media posts come out, I hope those who are inclined will share so we can get the word out. I am not sure if council is aware, but the town has been called up to provide hazmat services on Friday in Guilford when President Trump has his visit. So most of the time when we get called up by the state, we get reimbursed by Maine Emergency Management. When we asked the question of who was paying the bill, the state said nobody from the state. This doesn't qualify for emergency management funds. So I have reached out, Cindy, I copied you on the email that I sent to Senator Collins' office asking her to please help us navigate how to get reimbursed $3,000 to $5,000 to do what the state has directed us to do to support the federal government. And she is all over it. So I hopefully will be able to tell you what that is. The Maine Municipal Association published to some municipal officials, I think it was one municipal official from each town, a draft plan for, they're calling it Keep Maine Healthy, and it's a draft tourism plan. That plan would change the town's role in the COVID-19 response. It looks like it would be a process that we could opt into, but we would then take responsibility for doing public education and enforcement around COVID-19. We were asked for input that closed today, came out yesterday afternoon, closed today at noon. I did provide input that I was very concerned that municipalities throughout COVID-19 have taken a role as problem solver and resolver of issues, and to create a situation where we are now the COVID-19 police. I don't have code officers that can do it. I don't have additional life safety officers that can do it. And we've done all this work with our police to be community friendly, and walking up to people and telling them they're not 6 feet apart doesn't really feel very community friendly. So on the one hand, and this is what I said, on the one hand, we need to make it easier for businesses to know that they can open up, right? We need to not just create these arbitrary guidelines. Places need to be able to look and say, yeah, this is doable and this is how I can do it. Or, you know what, that really doesn't work and I'll transition to outdoors, or whatever the case may be. And the plan that they're putting forward doesn't really help us get to a consistent message for our businesses. And it's just weird that we've got people who work for the town. I heard all about people back in Brownville this weekend going up to Brownville to enjoy dine-in eating because you can do it up there. And they would much prefer to be here. And so I have some real reservations for where we're headed, and the costs associated with it appear that the town would be responsible for them. It feels a little bit like a little bit of a cost shift, just saying. So I have given feedback trying to say, make it easier for our businesses and don't make us the bad guy. And we'll see whether or not the state listens. They don't normally listen to me. Bridge signs. Based on our meeting on Monday, Rob Yerxa created some beautiful sign. The pencil sketch that he did was gorgeous, and it has gone to white sign, and the signs will be in, and we'll be able to put them up within a week from Tuesday, right? A week from Tuesday, this past Tuesday. Yes.
Yes.
So understand there's only so much you can put on a sign. And talking with the team here, one of the things we wanted was not to be, so we didn't want to be shouting at people because they tend to ignore it. And we wanted to go to more of the skateboarding route as opposed to the don't. It's like be kind, and there's a graphic and people are standing 6 feet apart. It is in our social messaging that we are going to try to get the word out about if there are people coming at you who have mobility challenges or have strollers and that kind of thing, please yield and step aside to allow them to pass. So that is kind of where we are. I wanted to touch base with you about that. And the final one is, I might be upsetting people, which happens occasionally, but I like to tell you about it so that you understand where I'm coming from. I've had a couple of inquiries from people who wanted me to replace a couple of the pride flags with a United States flag and a UMaine flag. And my answer has been, number one, the town does not own a U.S. A national flag or a UMaine flag that is set up to go on, with a stick to be hung. We simply don't have those. And that I was quite sure if a group of community members came along and raised money and bought flags and came to the town council because they wanted to put US flags or UMaine flags out, that the town council would probably be just as supportive of that initiative once the pride flags were down. So just be aware that's out there, that I am not really entertaining that because nobody was knocking on my door before June 1st to put any other kind of flag up on the bridge. And so that's my message, and perhaps I should have delivered it more nicely, but that is the message I've given to my staff to deliver as well.
I don't have an issue with your delivery at all. I think it sets up a false dichotomy that American values are antithetical to LGBTQ plus people, and that's ridiculous and offensive. So if people have a problem with that, I certainly don't have a problem with your messaging at all.
I think it's always nice to be polite, and I think that you were, by pointing out that the people who raised the money for the flags and requested our assistance in demonstrating pride went through a process, and that other people are welcome to go through that process is certainly the right thing to do. But being polite and having pleasant tone is always good. I just wanted to circle back to the hazmat, the call for our hazmat team. What's the potential cost in that if they're not going to reimburse us? And do we have the right as a town to say, no thanks, we're glad you invited us to this party, but we're not interested in participating?
So I think this is one of these things that I cannot get an answer to quick enough, Lori, to say no, because we are technically a state hazmat team, and technically the state has directed us to go. So I don't have the money in the budget to cover the expense. But out of the hazmat budget, the way that works is if at the end of the day, it's going to be somewhere between $3,000 and $5,000 that we would have billed. We won't have a direct expense for our truck this year, which is a significant piece of that. We bill by the hour for the equipment, but there will be overtime. I will log that against the hazmat account, which is its own fund. If it goes into the hole, we pull out of the hazmat reserve fund, which has about $140,000 in it, I think, at the year end. If there is money left over at the end of the year, it sweeps into that fund. So it's a back and forth with that fund.
And how many hazmat teams are called to do this service?
So there has to be one evidently, according to our conversation with the Secret Service, every place the president goes, there is one hazmat team with them. And it's not just hazmat, it has to be hazmat with weapons of mass destruction capability, is my understanding. And we are the closest hazmat team, which is why we were asked to go. And it's really hard when you think that, we are technically a state team and we get $15,000 a year from the state, and the state paid for the hazmat special operations truck that we use. So it's a delicate balance, and my hope is that we'll get reimbursed. But if we don't, then we can have conversation with the state coming up as to specifically what we have to do. But the history here is the state tells us to go somewhere and we go.
Which is very reasonable under normal circumstances. I think it's unreasonable when our governor politely asked the president not to come to our state, and now our town, our small town, is going to potentially foot the bill for a service that we shouldn't have to provide.
Oh, totally agree.
And it puts it's putting our employees at risk, because there's a lot of unrest in the country right now. And
if there was a place I would rather not have my staff, sure. In a place where we know there are going to be protests happening. The sheriff of Piscataquis County has issued statements around his concern around unrest in the county. But I also think that it is a service that we normally would provide, and now I just think we need to holler a little bit about getting reimbursed for it, and then sit down with the state moving forward, because the answer can be moving forward. if the state isn't going to pay for it, then we need to have a conversation about what exactly is our obligation to go to these things. And ultimately, council can make those decisions about what we will or will not do.
Yeah, Sophie, I think this is actually a good opportunity that with these individuals, this community, that we're all Mainers and we can actually help them through this thing. But I think it's really great to say, going forward, we can do it this time, but we really have to visit this, as this is not going to be a good space. Like as Lori put, even for the citizens or the individuals who work, are we putting them in harm's way and on so many levels like this? But I would say, like, we have to do what we have to do to help those fellow communities that are Mainers now, but looking forward, something has to be put in place.
Yeah. Yep.
Since they're a hazmat team, they're there not as police or fire. They're there only if there's a call for hazmat. So they're on site if
Yes.
there's some threat.
Yeah.
Other-
We'll have 6 hazmat technicians, the special operations truck, a pickup truck, and all the assorted hazmat equipment that goes into that special operations truck.
Okay, if that is it, we are at the meeting. So we're coming back tomorrow with Joe.
Yeah, and I will, first thing in the morning, try to get you out an updated, Joe and I have actually updated his budget and his capital plan to reflect what we think is a significant decrease in revenues.
Is this just going to be an online doc? Just look for an online attachment?
Well, I can do it. My understanding is that we've got some people on council who much prefer to have paper stuff. And if you much prefer it, I can, in the morning, get Mitch or someone to deliver to everybody, so you have the up-to-date pieces. Or if I know right now that you're not interested, then I won't make you a packet. So you let me know what you want.
How many pages about? Because I can print.
So his OMR and his service stuff, I think we keep the same. So you're looking at 1, 2, 3, about 8 pages, 7 or 8 pages.
I can print it. My printer does front and back, so that's only 4 pages for me. So you don't have to send a packet out if you don't want to.
But I can if I want to. And if
Oh.
it's got a capital, and if he's got a capital budget major change, I would reprint the whole thing there too. So if you don't mind having staff just drop it off, then I know you have it. It makes me feel better.
Yeah, whatever's easier. That's fine.
Okay. All
I
right.
like to see Mitch. I like to see Mitch.
Mitch likes to see you too.
I'm glad.
All right. That's all I have, folks.
Great. Well, it's
As
dinner
always.
time.
Been a pleasure.
Yes.
Thank you.
We'll
Bye.
see you all tomorrow.
Thank you, Sophie.